Live from Buffalo State, this is the Sports Reporters Radio Show on 91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo. This is Buffalo's original alternative since 1982, brought to you by the Buffalo State College Student Activity Fee. There were some big moves made this week in both the NHL and NBA. The Sabres decided to fire head coach Lindy Ruff, who had a 16-year tenure with the team. They replaced him by promoting Ron Rolston from the Rochester Amherst. The Milwaukee Bucks and Boston Celtics appear to be the biggest winners of the trade deadline. The Bucks acquired J.J. Redick without having to give up any key contributors, while the Celtics added another shooter in Jordan Crawford, giving up an injured Leandro Barbosa and Jason Collins. Spring training is about to begin, and we'll be joined by Toronto Sun baseball columnist Bob Elliott. And we're live here on the Sports Reporters Radio Show, 91.3 FM, WBNY. We are in Student Union here. I'm the host of the show, AJ Speier, joined alongside Aubrey Gibert. As you mentioned, huge news this week for Buffalo. Lindy Ruff has been fired. Ron Rolston has taken his place as Rochester Amherst, and as you saw, the Buffalo Sabres lost 3-1 to the Toronto Maple Leafs. They'll be playing the New York Islanders tomorrow night. I actually have tickets for this game, so I'm kind of looking forward to it. What are your thoughts on it, Aubrey?
Yeah, didn't come as a surprising move to me. I don't know if it came down as surprising to you. It was a move that had to be made. Much respect for Lindy Ruff. He coached 17 years since 1996. Great coach, great player in his time. But, it was just a move that had to be made. The team has underachieved. They have talent on the team, and they have not played motivated. I mean, when a team isn't playing up to expectations, that's one thing. But when a team is playing with no passion, then that comes down to the coaching. And, I mean, the players that come out and said it. Ryan Miller has come out and said it before. Robin Ruggiero has come out and said it. So, the team, I think, Darcy Ruggiero said that he didn't think Lindy Ruff lost the team, but I totally disagree. I think that he totally lost the team, and they just tuned him out because it's the same thing every game. Even last night, same thing. Just giving up too many goals and not scoring enough goals. So it was a move that had to be made, and we'll see what happens in the future.
I think the problem was the system, obviously, because he's a defensive-minded coach. Surprisingly, we never really had any of the top 10 defenses when we had our teams. Obviously, Ryan Miller was great with the save percentage, but it wasn't the defensive scheme like the trap defense you're talking about with the Minnesota Wild and the New Jersey Devils. But you look at the players we had in our team. Tyler Myers, he's not really an aggressive checker as a defenseman. Neither is Jordan Leopold. They're more softer guys who can get involved with the offense, which I'm kind of curious to see what we're going to get from Rolston and see if he can kind of incorporate that back into the game where they let the blue liners get involved. I remember Dmitry Kalinin kind of struggled with the same thing when he was with Buffalo. Then they let him get more involved, and you saw what happened there with the Drury and Briere years.
Yeah. It's interesting to see what he's going to do. I think the number one thing he's got to do is try to get whatever confidence instilled in Tyler Myers that he can. I mean, this guy is playing with no confidence right now, and this team has no toughness right now, and that's what's lacking the most. Teams are just, skating right by us, and it's just too easy. And I think Ryan Miller has honestly bailed us out to the rankings that we have now, because we probably would be even worse. I mean, we have probably the best goaltender in the NHL. Imagine if we had, a regular average guy. I mean, will we even have 6 wins? We might have like 2 or 3, to be honest with you, because there's been games where, we haven't scored. We've maybe scored 2 or 3 goals and won because Ryan Miller has literally saved us games. There's only been one game I remember where we scored, a lot of goals, and that was that Boston game where we scored 7. I mean, one was a shorthanded. I mean, one was the empty netter, so I guess we should say 6. But, I mean, besides that, how many games have we really scored even 3 to 4 goals?
I'm going to check on here real quick.
I mean, we've given up 3 or 4 goals probably every game, but we probably only scored 3 or 4, even in probably some of the wins, we didn't even score that many. So it's, it's crazy because we went into the season thinking that our defense would be our strength, and it's our weakness.
Yeah, they kept boasting about how they had 10 defensemen that they could play at any point.
We don't have half.
Yeah, I mean, there's talks about T.J. Brennan should be gone. Obviously, people want Tyler Myers to be gone. I had a strategy where you put him as a forward and let him screen the goalie, but they're not going to do that. But, I mean, you look at how bad this team is. I mean, 6-11-1 is their record, 13 points. You're in a really tough division. If you look over the Northeast, Montreal, 24 points. Three-way tie for second with Boston, Toronto, and Ottawa, each with 22 points. And Buffalo, you mentioned, I mean, they're 9 points behind all those teams. Really don't have a shot at winning the division, you'd think, at this point, unless somehow miraculously they have a comeback. Tyler Ennis has stepped up his game lately, so that's one positive I can see so far for this team. You do have Ryan Miller, but you know what he's capable of. The question is, how does he handle the goaltender situation? Does he go with Enroth? Does he call up Lecchio from Rochester? Because Miller can't play every single night.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm gonna go out. I don't even think it's going out on a limb, really, but I think personally, Tyler Ennis is the second most talented player the Sabres have. I mean, offensive-wise, excuse me. Overall-wise, obviously, Ryan Miller is the best player on the team. But I think Thomas Vanek is the best offensive player we have. And I think Tyler Ennis, in terms of just raw, natural ability, is the second best player on the Sabres. He's not on the first line, obviously, but he's on that second line with Stafford, who's been shuffled in and out of that lineup, and Marcus Foligno. And he's starting to get better now. He's starting to get back that momentum he had last year. A guy who's really stepping it up. But, where's Drew Stafford?
Where's Marcus Foligno?
Marcus Foligno? Can we get a little bit of production? Nathan Gerby, can we get something?
The thing about Gerby is that he's so short, though. I mean, at least he's willing to stick up.
Grigorenko, can we get something?
Grigorenko hasn't even seen the ice, though. The thing is, they've been putting Jochen Heschen instead. Nobody understands that move either. I mean, you had him paired up with Scott and Patrick Coletta, and you thought he was going to get something done. I mean, Grigorenko, if you're known as an offensive forward, why are you going to put him with guys who are there for checking and fighting?
I mean, and obviously, besides the first line, the only players that I think that are even being productive are Tyler Ennis. I think Steve Ott is playing really good. I mean, I think he's a guy. Yeah. He's a guy who's playing with passion. He's a guy that I hope everybody else can model their game after him. He might not be the best, offensive guy, but
he's the best all around.
And he's in positions to make plays. A lot of his goals have been him just being in the right position. So,
I mean, he's only had 3 goals so far, but I mean, I understand what you're saying. He's got 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points, but he's got a plus-minus of 4, which shows you that when he's on the ice, things get accomplished.
Yeah.
Now, the problem I have with the Sabres so far is you have Jason Pominville is your captain. Thomas Vanek is your assistant captain. Both players are known to be really quiet players, and in order to win championships, you need vocal guys. You look at what worked for the Sabres in the past when they had Daniel Briere and Chris Drury. Drury put a picture of a Stanley Cup inside the locker room, and he said, this is what we're here for every day. And he was really getting into the players' faces about trying to win. And you look what happened. I mean, if we don't have the injury to Jamie Key, and I think Brett Warner in that series against Carolina, that could possibly go to the Stanley Cup that year. So I think it's a matter of leadership problems, not just from the coaching staff, but from the players as well. Like I said, you can't lead by example and expect to win games. You have to be vocal and call players out. Drew Stafford needs to show up. He's a former 30-goal scorer.
He might as well take his check and just bring it on down to the charity, because he's not earning one bit. I think he's getting $6-7 million a year. He might as well go up to charity, because he has not shown up this year whatsoever. I mean, I know he's a streaky guy. He's a guy that, in the past has had a couple big games, and he'll fall off. But one goal this year for a guy who's making $7-8 million a year, unacceptable. Unacceptable at all, especially based off of how he played last year and the year before that. Unacceptable.
Yeah, and you look at his plus-minus, he's a -5. But we mentioned Jordan Leopold, and Myers are pretty much the guys who are the reasons for why I'd say the Sabres have struggled. You look at Leopold on the ice, -7, Myers, -6, and I mentioned Stafford at -5, Foligno, -4. They can't get the production, obviously, offensively. In a defensive end, I mean, they're not really guys who can check, so they're really out there for no reason. And I mentioned the Sabres needing to make a trade, and some people who I would dangle out there would be Stafford, Foligno, and Gerby before they lose all complete and total trade value.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's going to want to take on Drew Stafford's salary with the on-ice production this year. Maybe somebody figures in their system that he could prosper. So at this point, for those players, I would take something, just anything, because they're not, especially Stafford, because of his salary. I would definitely take whatever somebody offers, because he's getting paid way too much for the production that's on the ice. The first line I think is set. You have Haxon, Vanek and Pominville.
They actually tried splitting that up.
I mean, and, I've thought about that, too, to the point where they're getting so much production and you're getting none in other places. Do you have to split it up almost and try to spread it out?
I think at this point you kind of have to because, Vanek and Pominville really haven't been as productive lately when you needed them. And you look at all the games where they really had success. They had a 2-1 victory, but they've had to score usually 3 or 4 goals at least in order to win these kind of games. We mentioned that they were trying to go with the defensive philosophy. Well, that's great, but if it's not working, you're going to have to find a way to score goals. And as I mentioned, you got to get your defensive more involved. You got to get Myers and Leopold involved more. Yeah. So it's just a whole philosophy change. I'm not going to read too much into the game against Toronto because obviously Rolston really didn't get a chance to practice with them. If you remember, Lindy Ruff had a 90-minute practice. Then he was informed that he was going to be fired, or he was fired, and he addressed the team before they left for Toronto. Rolston takes over as coach the next night. Roy doesn't have an opportunity to talk to them yet. Then he has his first practice today, I want to say, and then obviously tomorrow will be his first game after our practice.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I was at WGR when this happened, and I just had cut the clip, of Ruff's interview, and we just get the call. Ruff's fired, and it was like, it's something that we've all been wanting. But even when it happened, you were just so surprised that the Sabres would make that move at this time in the season. People were still like in shock. And I listened to his press conference today. That's a high class guy, a guy that I really wish it would have worked out for. I definitely think he'll get a job next year somewhere else. I think that this team did have talent. But there's talent everywhere in the NHL. So I think that he'll be able to go somewhere else where maybe he'll have better personnel for his system. And, my highest regards go out to him, definitely. Great coach.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. But like I said, I don't think the personnel is here for his system that he wants to run. No. And he mentioned it's always a system team, right? Or league, whatever you want to talk about. In the NBA, you got to have the right players. NFL, you have to have the right players. Same thing here. Baseball's the one where you can really get away with it. If you look at the Yankees, they technically have like a power / speed kind of thing, but they're more leaning toward power because of how easy it is to hit home runs to right field.
Yeah.
But yeah, in every sport, it's all about system because coaches find it harder to adjust sometimes. Chan Gailey, specifically for the Buffalo Bills, he really didn't have a system per se. He wanted to do a 3-step drop and throw it, but he was willing to run it as well, mix in some screens as well. And he was a guy who worked with whatever he had. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. You have to have the right system and bring in the right players.
Just go down to L.A., see how that system is working out there in L.A. They have looked good after the All-Star break, but like you said, though, it's all about personnel and adjusting to a system, no doubt about it.
And there's actually been some players who are out on the trade market right now that the Sabres could consider. I don't know if they'd want to go after Daniel Alfredsson, but he's being dangled out there. Ryan O'Reilly from Colorado is another big name who could become a potential number 1 center. I don't know if we have the pieces to get Ryan O'Reilly, though, and make Colorado interested. I would almost think you'd have to put Tyler Myers and Drew Stafford at least on there, and I don't know if that would be enough.
Yeah, I don't think that would be enough as well.
Potential.
Unless you go with past production. Myers and Stafford both have had
look at
some
a rookie of the
very
year.
Good production. Yeah, obviously Myers. He was and Stafford had 30 goals season before too. So, sometimes people look at players and they don't look at how they are right now, but what they think they could be in their system. So I think it's all about a perspective that Colorado has. If they want to do that trade, I think you would have to do it. Even with the production this year, I would feel like it's a lot to give up, but then you have to look at potential, and Ryan O'Reilly has that potential.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you as well. Let's go on to our next topic, though. We have to go to the NBA because, the NHL is pretty much dominated by Lindy Ruff news. Other than that, as I mentioned, the Northeast is pretty much dominating the NHL. But let's go over to the NBA real quickly. Some big transactions. Jordan Crawford, now a member of the Boston Celtics, giving him another shooting guard option over there. They already had Jason Terry and Courtney Lee. I think Crawford's a great fit for them as well, but they don't have a backup point guard at this point.
They don't have a point guard, period.
Well, Avery Bradley can handle the duties.
Yeah, obviously, when you lose a guy like Rajon Rondo, it's going to be a big drop-off in terms of point guard. But, I think it's kind of been like a blessing in disguise for the Celtics because I feel as though, a lot of players are stepping up more because a lot of players depended on Rondo a lot, and I think now that they know that Rondo isn't there, a lot of players know they have to step up their game. Guys like Jeff Green had to step up. Paul Pierce has stepped up. I've seen his production go up. And Garnett, I mean, it's more and more pressure for him, but I think he's starting to play better. I like Courtney Lee. I like Avery Bradley. Jordan Crawford, I like him as well. Another young guy. That's the thing with the Boston. They don't have a lot of young guys. He's another guy that can come in, get you points. I think he'll come off the bench. So a guy who come off the bench, get you some points in bunches. So with the Celtics, I think it's just, can they fight this father time? Because Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett are on their last leg, especially Kevin Garnett, who I think will retire at the end of the season, honestly.
I'm kind of curious to see what happens to both Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett as the season goes on. We mentioned last year how the season was kind of short, and you were able to see teams like San Antonio and Boston make a great run at a possible championship. Obviously, both teams fell short as Oklahoma City and Miami made it to the finals. But you're looking at a full season this year. You're looking over at Boston, as you mentioned, Garnett and Pierce having to really step up. They're gonna wear down toward the season possibly and not go far. I mean, right now you're looking at the possibility of them having to face like a Miami or Indiana, maybe the Knicks in the first round of the playoffs. I don't think Boston's got the roster currently to win that matchup. I think Crawford will help out offensively in that end, but they still have issues in their front court, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. They need a center.
And trading Jason Collins kind of hurt their depth, but they got another shooter because Jason Terry's kind of struggled this season. He's not quite the Ray Allen they hoped he would be. Another big trade in the NBA was J.J. Redick going to the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, this is really interesting for me because obviously certain teams have nicknames. Like you look at the Los Angeles Clippers, they're Lob City. You can technically call them the Milwaukee Bucks Jumper City now because Brandon Jennings, Monta Ellis, and J.J. Redick are all known for their jump shooting. And they really don't have any other players on their team that really stand out. I mean, they have Larry Sanders, who's a great up-and-coming player. They have Ersan Ilyasova, who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. They have Luke Richard Mbamute. Mbamute. It's so hard to say his name. But, yeah, it's going to be basically relying on their guards going forward. And the question is, can their front court do what it needs to do as far as rebounding and stuff in order to win games for them? I look at Milwaukee as making this move because they realize that Monta Ellis more than likely is not coming back next year. He's got a player option for next year in his contract, which he's probably going to decline and become a free agent. I would if I were him, because he's more of a shooting guard / point guard kind of player where he has to have the ball. I don't want to say he's a Russell Westbrook, but he's kind of in that area.
He's a poor man, because he's not as good shooting and athletically as Russell Westbrook. But I really don't, like you said, maybe that's why you make this move. Maybe because you're thinking that you can re-sign J.J. Redick long-term and let Monta Ellis walk. But I don't understand that move from the perspective that you didn't get rid of Monta Ellis, because you really can't start J.J. Redick at the small forward because he's not big enough and he isn't good defensively. So are you going to bring him off the bench? Or I don't understand the move whatsoever. I think that Monta Ellis, he's one of those guys that's talented, but he just doesn't fit teams because in order for him to be effective, he has to have the ball in his hand, and I think he's shooting 40% on a season. So I mean, if you want to put the ball in the hands of a guy who's only shooting 40%, I'm not going to rely on that.
I mean, look at how much better Golden State's doing this.
He's a combo guard.
Look at how much better Golden State's doing this season without him. They put Klay Thompson at shooting guard. They had David Lee, obviously, last year at the trade deadline, or before the trade deadline, and they were struggling. This season now, they're looking at a possible playoff spot. Let me look at the record real quick. They're 31-23.
Yeah, I think they're sixth in the West right now.
Yeah, 31-23, second in the division behind the Clippers. Obviously, that's a weak division though, with Phoenix, Sacramento, and the Lakers with their problems. But yeah, Golden State having a much better season. You mentioned David Lee is an All-Star game. It was an All-Star. Steve Curry should have been.
Stephen Curry, he should have been.
Stephen Curry should have been an All-Star. But I mean, you're looking at a Golden State team who's much improved since they got rid of Monta Ellis. No more selfish play for that team. Milwaukee,
I feel like he virtually went from this. I think he went from Golden State to the same situation. I mean, he's with a point guard who isn't really a point guard. Brandon Jennings. I think Stephen Curry is better than Brandon Jennings, but Brandon Jennings is virtually the same player. A guy who takes a lot of shots, and he only averages like 6 or 7 assists a game, which is okay. But I mean, Russell Westbrook is averaging 8.5 assists a game, and is he really a point guard? Well, stats don't always tell the truth, and there's just two guards who. It's like, okay, you had the ball one play. You go ahead, had the ball one play. And I think that's why they would have got rid of Monta Ellis and brought J.J. Redick in. I thought Redick would have worked with Jennings because of the fact that, he can spot up and play off of Jennings. He doesn't need the ball to set up. He can set up based off of Jennings. He can play off him. See, Monta Ellis and Brent, they don't play off each other. It's just one ISO, another ISO. They don't play together.
I'm concerned as far as being a Knicks fan, though, because I kind of feel like we should have got another shooting guard. I'm not really sold on Jason Kidd. I know he had great success at the beginning of the year, but
JR is struggling again.
He's in the doghouse now too because of what he did.
Yeah, did you see that
against Indiana?
I couldn't believe. And did you see the rumor provocative text that he sent a woman? I can't even say this over the air to you. I'll just show it to you. That's how bad it is.
I'll be like,
and the excuse he made for it is just JR back in the day. This is another JR move. He's been struggling recently. He's very inconsistent. So, I definitely was thinking like they could use another guy who can shoot. But I think it's time to move Kidd to the bench and let Shumpert play the 2 where he prospered last year. He's struggling with the small
Melo
forward
come
position.
back down to the 3. Let Stoudemire
either Stoudemire come back in the lineup or I wouldn't mind putting Copeland in there.
They actually did that in the second half against Indiana, but Stoudemire had 3 fouls going into that, and he got his 4th foul pretty quickly.
He's just so bad defensively.
I have an interesting stat for you real quickly, and this is why I think the Knicks should have got rid of Shumpert. He's not really a 3-point shooter, and he's more for his defense, but they've been struggling defensively. I mean, they allowed 74 points to Indiana in the first half, and Indiana's like one of the worst offenses in the league. I believe they're averaging 92.8 points.
They're in the bottom 5, definitely.
But here's the interesting stat. When the Knicks make fewer than 10 3-pointers, they're 7-14. When they make more than 10 3-pointers, 25-5.
This team now at this point is reminding me of OKC last year. This is a team that is a good team, but is too reliant on the jump shot. I think OKC, they got now this is how it can change up for you really quick. James Harden shot them into the finals versus Spurs. They were down 2-0, and they shot themselves back into that finals because James Harden could not miss. And I think Kevin Durant, Kevin Durant did what he had to do. Westbrook did what he had to do. But James Harden was that X factor. He couldn't miss. Then you get to the Heat, you get that pressure D, and Harden couldn't make anything. And the rest of the team, besides Durant, the team struggled shooting-wise. And that's why I think that even though the post game is pretty much non-existent in the NBA, you need it because there's going to be times where your jump shot is just not going to fall, and you need points still. So, this is a team now it's too reliant on the jump shot right now. I think the guards need to penetrate more. I think they need to get the ball down low to Stoudemire more. I think Melo's supposed to post up more and just get back to the bread and butter, and just drive and kick. It's too much, it's just too much reliant on jump shooters and their defense. That's the number one. They have to get back on the defense. Woodson has got to do something to shake this team up defensively because it's just not there right now. It's just not there.
Well, one of the biggest factors, when they lost Rasheed Wallace, you kind of saw that was going to happen. He gave him a great presence from the 4 spot when Carmelo came out. Now that you have Stoudemire back, we talked about this would be a potential issue when Stoudemire came back. It's not that he hasn't been playing well, but it's a matter of a system fit. They were a team that were shooting a lot of threes. When he comes into the game, he's not a 3-point shooter. You put Carmelo back at the 3 position, you're down one less shooter.
Yeah, and that's why I would think about putting Copeland in the starting 5 and keeping Melo at the 4 because that gives you another space, another guy who can shoot the 3 and space the floor out more. But I wouldn't be upset if Stoudemire was in there too because of the fact that his post game looks good. The problem with him is he just. I think in the end of the game he literally got in the game and I don't even think a second ran. He got a foul. I'm like, this is probably the quickest foul I've ever seen in my life where I got to get the foul not even 2 seconds into just getting into the game. So, I thought the officiating was kind of bad. I thought it was a lot of soft fouls. I thought Melo got fouled a lot. But I think, the game, since Indiana was so much more physical, they got more calls.
Yeah.
It made Lance Stevenson look like he was back at Lincoln High School, and I just was like, Lance Stevenson?
I don't know if it's more about the Knicks being bad or the fact that Indiana's one of the better teams in the league right now, and people just don't notice it.
No, I think that was a bad game by the Knicks. Don't get me wrong. Indiana balled, though. Indiana balled.
They're the one team that should scare Miami the most.
Oh, I think they noticed that. I think the only 2 teams that if any team can threaten Miami, which I've never said this before, but I don't think anybody's going to beat Miami. But if there's a team that's going to beat them, I think Indiana and then the Knicks possibly if they get respect to their defense. But Indiana definitely is the top threat because of the fact that they have the perimeter players, they have the guys down low, and they play defense. Well, if they can get Granger back, that's the key. If they can get Granger back, it's interesting to see how him and Paul George are going to play together. That's going to be a big chemistry thing. But I think they have enough time to get they have 30 games probably to get it together.
I'm more curious to see what they do with Lance Stevenson when he comes back, because then you have to put Paul George back at shooting guard then.
As another guy off the bench. I wouldn't mind him off the bench. But
talking about Indiana real quickly before we go to break, Indiana currently the best defense in the NBA. They're only allowing 32% from beyond the arc, and going against a team like the New York Knicks, you kind of knew they were going to struggle going into that game. But Miami kind of has a similar kind of strategy approach in their kind of game as well. I mean, Dwayne Wade can hit the threes, Ray Allen can hit threes. They added Rashard Lewis this past offseason, which is one of the big reasons why they went and they added Chris Birdman Anderson to their team.
Who I think is playing very well.
Yes, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens down the stretch. I think Indiana is one of those teams to look out for. If they get another 2-1 lead over Miami in the playoffs again, and they're able to win another game, I wouldn't be surprised to see them possibly make it to the finals this year.
See, a lot of people are saying that, but my thing is, your chance was last year. Simply put, Chris Bosh was out after game 1. All it was LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, and you let them dominate you after being up 2-1.
What is Miami's weakness? Chris Bosh.
But Chris Bosh is still a guy that you have to account for.
He can't match up with Roy Hibbert.
He can still open.
He can't match up with Roy Hibbert.
Yeah, and that. But I think Roy Hibbert is having a down season this year. I think he's a soft guy, to be honest with you. I think if you just bump him, But then they have so much depth off the bench. But your chances of beating the Heat with just Dwayne Wade and LeBron James is way better than Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James. Now you can say what you want about Chris Bosh, but he's still gonna get to 17-9 a game, and he still hits open jump shot.
I don't know if he can against Indiana.
You don't think so?
Look at their front.
I think when LeBron James penetrates, he's gonna be open.
Look at their front court: David West, Tyler Hansborough, Roy Hibbert.
I think the only way Chris Bosh is not a factor is if you literally single team LeBron James and let him and Dwayne Wade go off.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
But I don't see that happening.
Paul George has been a lockdown defender this year.
Can he take LeBron James though?
Danny Granger got the assignment last year.
Yeah. I think they need to put Paul George on LeBron and let hopefully Granger pick up the offense.
Take Wade.
Yeah, take away, and not that he can take up the offense. I mean, the matchup will be compelling. Don't get me wrong, and especially down low, like you said, Chris Bosh playing center. They'll probably put Udonis Haslem on Hibbert, or do you think about starting Chris Birdman? I mean, it's interesting. If it gets there, it's going to be interesting. Oh my God, Rashard Lewis! Oh God!
But when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about baseball, because I mean you have to. His spring training's coming up. I believe some games are starting today. The Cleveland Indians are definitely starting today. Toronto Blue Jays are starting on Saturday. One of the guests we're looking to have is Toronto Sun baseball columnist Bob Elliott. He wanted me to call him, but that's one of the big problems we have here at WBNY. We can't make outgoing phone calls. So I texted him to call in. We'll see what happens. I'm going to try to call him from my cell phone during the break and see if we can get him to call.
Smell that green grass. Baseball is here.
Dude, watch out for Toronto. I'm telling you. If the Los Angeles Angels don't make it, I think the Blue Jays have a pretty good chance. And they have some of the cheapest seats in baseball to go to games. So.
And it's only an hour away. Hour and a half at the most.
Hour and a half away. I'm down. So when we come back from the break, we're going to try to have Bob Elliott call into our show. As I mentioned, I have to call him during the break. So we'll see what happens.
Sports Replay, located on 1614 Niagara Falls Boulevard in Tonawanda, buys, sells, and repairs new and used sporting goods since 1999. They specialize in hockey, snowboards, skiing, paintball, airsoft, and much, much more. Call in at 716-834-6595. Also on Facebook. Once again, Sports Replay at 1614 Niagara Falls Boulevard, a quarter mile off the 290.
All right, gentlemen, let's review. The year is 2032.
This is 91.3 FM WBNY Buffalo.
I'm into freedom of speech and freedom of choice. I want high cholesterol. I want to eat bacon and butter and buckets of cheese, okay? I want to smoke a Cuban cigar the size of Cincinnati in the non-smoking section. I want to run through the streets naked with green jello all over my body reading Playboy magazine. Why? Because I suddenly might feel the need to, okay, pal?
Brought to you by the student activity fee at Buffalo State College.
I've seen the future. You know what it is? It's a 47-year-old virgin sitting around in his beige pajamas drinking a banana broccoli shake singing I'm an Oscar Mayer wiener.
The WBNY 25 is a weekly countdown of the top songs by airplay here on Buffalo's Original Alternative. I'm Tom Connolly, and each week I'll count down the top 25 songs and tell you a little bit more about the music you love. The WBNY 25, Tuesdays 7 to 9 a.m., rebroadcast Fridays 7 to 9 a.m., only here on 91.3 FM WBNY.
And so it begins.
And we're back on 91.3 FM, WBNY. I tried to call Bob Elliott. I got his voicemail. So, I mean, he's coming to Buffalo today before he goes to Florida on Saturday for the first spring training game. There's a George Strait concert tonight here in Buffalo, and apparently he's a huge country fan, so maybe he's driving instead of being the passenger. So we'll find out what happens later on today. Maybe we'll have him on, maybe we won't. If not, I'll try to get him on in the future. He was the first Canadian sports writer to make it into the Hall of Fame, so it's a huge guess if I can get him on our show. But anyway, looking at baseball right now, I mean, you look at the Toronto Blue Jays, huge offseason for them. They have R.A. Dickey now. They have Josh Johnson. They went and acquired Mark Burley. Then they go look at their infield. They go and get Jose Reyes, Meister Turris, Emilio Bonifacio, Mark DeRosa in the outfield. I mean, they add Melky Cabrera.
And then you still got Jose Bautista.
And he actually struggled this past season. He only had 27 home runs. You look at Edwin Encarnacion, he had 42 home runs. This is a really balanced lineup over there, but I'm kind of concerned about their pitching staff. You have Josh Johnson, who struggled coming off of Tommy John surgery this past season. He went 8-14 with the Miami Marlins this past season. He's going to be going to a hitter's ballpark now, where he was in a pitcher's ballpark with Miami. You have R.A. Dickey, who's 38 years old. Now, I know he throws a knuckleball, but you still have to be concerned with the age factor. And Mark Burley, he's a fly ball pitcher. Once again, he's going to a hitter's ballpark. Something to be worried about. I mean, you're talking about a division where they're full of great hitters. And the New York Yankees are known for being able to hit fly balls out of the ballpark. I mean, they went and they added Kevin Youkilis.
Yeah, definitely a team that, you definitely have to consider, They have the hitting, you got Edwin Encarnacion, Jose Bautista. The top of the lineup is looking really good. You're probably going to go with Jose Reyes leading off, probably Melky Cabrera hitting second. Then you have a Jose Bautista as a 1-2-3. I mean, that's a real solid 1-2-3 combo at the top if they can stay healthy. So I think the biggest thing with the Blue Jays is going to be health. Jose Reyes has not been really healthy for a full season in a couple of seasons now. Jose Bautista is coming off a wrist injury from last year that put him on the DL. You have R.A. Dickey, who had that Cy Young campaign last season. Will he duplicate that next season? That's a big question. And can Josh Johnson stay healthy? So I think this team has a lot of potential. I think it's going to be health, and can their pitching match their offense? Because I think they're going to be able to hit the ball. And, I mean, Toronto's always been a team that can hit the ball, though. I mean, every year they can hit the ball. And when you're able to take Ricky Romero, who was your ace last season, and move him to fifth in the rotation, that tells you the amount of moves you made.
We have our guest with us right now. It's Bob Elliott of the Toronto Sun. He's the baseball columnist for them. He was the first Canadian sports writer to make it into the Hall of Fame as well. How you doing today, Bob?
Just excellent. How you doing?
I'm doing great as well. I'm really looking forward to the Toronto Blue Jays this season. I mean, obviously the Buffalo Bisons are now paired up with them as well. But I wanted to ask you a few questions because I've actually taken a few trips over to Toronto to go to the games. In past years, tickets to a Blue Jays game were easy to come by for a cheap price. How will the new acquisitions change the culture of Major League Baseball in Toronto?
Now, when you say you've come to Toronto for games, do you mean the Blue Jays or the Bills?
No, for the Blue Jays.
They haven't raised the prices, but they expect to do a lot better at the gate, and they're sold out opening night already. But that was the case last year, and I think the second and third night of the season last year, I think there were like 12,800 or 12,500 back to back. So that's what they're going to look at to see how big the drop-off is. That's usually a telltale sign. And the other one is what the second series is. Well, the second series this year is the Red Sox, and it's a weekend, and the Red Sox fans always come, and it'll be a welcome home for John Farrell. So I think they'll draw well those games too.
Now, obviously, the Blue Jays were the most active team in this offseason, bringing in a lot of big-name players. What's just the atmosphere and the expectations in Toronto coming into the season?
Well, the expectations are high, and I don't know if you guys ever went through it, but in that market, but Rogers has said for like 3 years or 4 years, don't worry, we'll spend when the time is right. And when they made the Marlins deal, and they took on salary, and they're going to go from about, I think, 83 or 85 million last year to about 125 or 127 this year. They'll in team payroll in the millions. People were very excited at that. In fact, I think people were more excited over the Marlins deal than they were over R.A. Dickey, because being in American League City, they didn't really know what Dickey had done. They saw the age, 38 years of age, and you got Hoyt Wilhelm pitch until he's 49, and Niekro's 47 and 46, and Wakefield till he was 44. So it's not like you don't use a similar gauge for a knuckleball pitcher.
Now, before this offseason, the Blue Jays had two great power hitters in Edwin Encarnacion and Jose Bautista. They've added speed with Jose Reyes and signing Melky Cabrera. How do you think they match up with the other elite teams in the American League?
Well, we've been we've been kind of running a little poll, like talking to people, like who has the most amount of talent as of right now, and the most people I talk to, whether it's scouts or executives, say that Toronto certainly has enough to reach the postseason. I do not believe those Vegas odds that say they're one of the best teams in baseball, or the favorites to win the World Series. I mean, I think Detroit's got a heck of a team, and I think the Giants are good, and Washington's excellent. So, I mean, I don't think. People they have to take a breath. I remember leaving the winter meetings a year ago, December, thinking we're going to see the Angels with Pujols and C.J. Wilson playing the Marlins in the World Series. But you don't win a World Series in November or December. You win it in October, and they just like 2 years before that. It was remember the Red Sox? They had the greatest team ever in the history of baseball, according to some people, and they were up the track.
Now, obviously with a lot of these moves, the Blue Jays took a lot of chances. One player they took a chance on, Melky Cabrera, after being suspended for the second half of last season. Why do you think the Blue Jays took that chance, and bringing in a guy who just was suspended last year for, performance-enhanced drugs?
Well, their philosophy has always been, whether it was going back to Steve Howe, I think, and there's been subsequent guys since then, where the president, Paul Beeston, he says, I don't mind giving a guy a second chance, but he says, I'm not giving a guy a seventh or an eighth chance. And this is Cabrera's second chance. He fouled up once, and Gibbons had him in Kansas City, and there wasn't any complaints or allegations about him 2 years ago when he was there. So they think he'll contribit. They think he'll be in the number 2 hole, but they also admit it's a gamble. I mean, if a guy, chances are if a guy does that once, he'll do it a second time.
Now, you mentioned John Gibbons as the manager. He already had a stint with him before where he was a .500 manager. Why did they choose him again?
Well, the thing going back when Anthopoulos hired his first manager, John Farrell, he was looking for a guy with a high ceiling in a manager. Now, that's a term, you'd hear a general manager say about a shortstop or an outfielder, but they didn't want any retreads or recycled guys like Bob Melvin, who made the postseason with Oakland, and who's another guy they turned? Brannicky, who made the postseason with the Brewers, and they so now they've decided to go with this down this road, and at the time they'd signed Asturias, they'd signed Cabrera, they'd made the Marlins trade, so. He said all along in Palm Springs at the GM's meetings, he said he wanted somebody that he could work with. So I'm thinking he's only worked with Frank Robinson in Montreal. It's not going to be him. Cito Gaston in Toronto. It's not going to be him. It's not going to be Gibbons. So I'm thinking, well, it's got to be Wakamatsu, the bench coach. But what I forgot about until basically the day before is that Gibbons, Antopoulos was there as the assistant general manager, and they had an excellent relationship under JP. And I don't think, with the talent they had, I think a 500 record is pretty good for what he had some of those years. And I think, especially, the Yankees had some powerhouse teams there, and Boston was excellent. The Boston and the Yankees they're going to see this year aren't as strong as years ago.
Now, looking on paper, obviously this team looks strong, in their lineup 1 through 9, and the pitching looks good 1 through 5. But that's not always the case. What do you see as a weakness, or what do you think is an area that the team might lack, or might hurt them down the road?
Well, Casey Janssen was the closer last year after Sergio Santos got hurt, their big deal from the White Sox the year before. And I think he only pitched about 5 games, Santos, before he went down. So he's hoping to be ready by opening day, but I'm sure they'll probably play it careful with him. But Janssen was okay, but he's not a guy. He's not a Goose Gossage. He's not a Rob Dibble. He's not one of those guys that strikes fear, and he's a thinker, as opposed to a power guy. And that's a problem. And then it's going to be a real problem if the other guys have outthought him this year. And it's going to be a real problem if Santos isn't ready. The area where people are worried about is Adam Lind, the DH, and he had the 35 homers the one year, and then they made him the first baseman, and he broke down about August from just from running out to first base. His back was bad, and then last year they said he was out of shape, and they sent him to Vegas. He came back, and he did very, very well. So they don't know what they're going to get from him.
If I had to predict a weakness for your team, I would say it's the right side of your infield. Meister Asturias wasn't exactly a starting second baseman with the Los Angeles Angels, and as you mentioned, Adam Lind has had his struggles. You have 2 utility players in Emilio Bonifacio and Mark DeRosa who've had success as starters. What roles do you see them playing this year?
I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see Bonifacio beat out Asturias for the everyday job, and I think Lind's going to be the DH, and Encarnacion will be at first base. So the Braves, before they got the other Upton brother, they tried to trade for Bonifacio. And I asked the one Braves guy, I said, what's so good about him? He says, well, he might steal 85 bases. He might lead the league in stolen bases. That's how good he is. But he can play center field, he can play left, he can play second base. But I don't know whether they've sort of given Asturias the job, but he's never been an everyday guy. But it'll be, we'll see how long it lasts.
Now, we've mentioned, we've talked about R.A. Dickey earlier. How do you think he's going to transition now? He's going from the National League to the American League, and how do you think that knuckleball is going to transition? I mean, you had Tim Wakefield in the AL East before. Do you see a similar production-wise, or do you see him dropping off, from the Cy Young year last year?
Well, it's going to be tough to duplicate last year, but even if he's like half a run higher and a couple of wins shy, they'd be happy with that. It's like when Batista hit 54 home runs, and they said, well, what do you expect? And I said, well, we don't expect 64. We'll be happy with 45 or 40 or something. Like the thing about I remember about Charlie Huff, the knuckleballer with Texas. He always enjoyed pitching in domes, like whether it was Minnesota or Seattle or Toronto or Tampa Bay, because you didn't have to worry about the wind blowing or behind your back or for pitching into the wind or crosswind or anything. It was a constant. The weather, you knew what you were getting every day. At 7:07 first pitch, you knew what the conditions were. And Dickey has some bad numbers in Toronto, but half of that is I don't know if exactly half, but a large part of it is before he became a knuckleballer when he was with the Rangers.
Now, we mentioned the fact that one of the biggest trades was with Miami. You have two pitchers coming over in that deal, and Josh Johnson, who struggled last past season coming off of Tommy John surgery, and then you have a fly ball pitcher going to a hitter-friendly ballpark, Mark Burley. What are your expectations for both those pitchers?
Well, everybody in the press box is really excited about Burley coming because he's the fastest worker that I've ever seen. I remember he beat Pat Henkin 1-0, and I think it was an hour and 48 minutes or something like that. You're right about he's pitching in a smaller park with Burley, and he is a fly ball pitcher. The thing about Johnson, I thought Johnson's latest, after winning the ERA title, his problem, the way I remember it, was his shoulder. And he didn't have anything done, he just had rest. And, sometimes they prescribe that. And I don't, like what happens, there's a concern there, there's a worry there, like if you have Tommy John, you're pretty well fixed, right? But the shoulders are, like Cito Gaston used to say, that, if they tell you on an elbow, they tell you 12 months, it's like a bus. It might be 5 minutes late or 5 minutes early, but on the shoulders, the doctors don't know. They just, it's because there's just so much going on in the labrum and the rotator and everything else. So that's another concern, how his health will be.
All right, and I mentioned at the beginning of our interview that the Bisons are now the AAA partnership with the Blue Jays. What are your thoughts on the partnership?
Oh, I think it's excellent news. I mean, outside of, I remember the Marlins years ago, about 6 or 7. I think it was their second year. Maybe they had their AAA club in Edmonton, and they couldn't. There wasn't a lot of flights back in those days, and if a guy got hurt in the first inning or whatever that night, they couldn't get him there the next day from Edmonton to Miami. So, I mean, these guys, they ran into all those kinds. Like the guy would be in Tucson, and he'd have to fly back to Vegas, get his stuff, and then fly. Like they started a guy last year, Carreño. They started him at a day game in in Milwaukee. They started him a day game, and he'd flown all night to get there, and he went 2 1/3. Like this is Buffalo. It's like 2 hours if you get a good bridge, So it's a dream come true. It's better than Syracuse, where they were for 18 years or 20 years or something.
All right, my last question for you is going to be this: which prospects should Bison fans keep an eye on this season?
Well, you ran into some rough luck. They traded a bunch of them. I guess you probably would have seen Marisniak. I think there's a chance Ghost could wind up there because they don't want him sitting on the bench as the fourth guy or the fifth guy. Rajah Davis, he's going to be the backup outfielder. Ghost is a guy. He's very, very exciting. He's got a base runner. He had a cannon as an arm. I mean, he threw 95 as a high school. Like they won a state championships in California, and they put him in the pitch, and he hadn't pitched at all. And they had him at 95, but he's a strong-armed outfielder. He's an exciting runner, and he's a little bit like Laurie in the fact that he's got I don't know what's the word. He's got some attitude, or which they haven't. He's an athlete, but he's also got that thing where if you're in the other dugout, you're saying, "Look at that guy," But and if you're in Ghost's dugout, you say, "Hey, he's our guy." He's one of those guys you love to play against, or hate to play against, and love to have on your team.
All right, thank you, Toronto Sun baseball columnist Bob Elliott, for joining our show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have fun at the George Strait concert tonight in Buffalo, and enjoy the warm weather in Florida for spring training. I'm jealous.
Okay. You guys going to the concert?
I'm not tonight. Maybe. I'm my co-host.
All right.
But, enjoy the warm weather, though.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was Bob Elliott, Toronto Sun baseball columnist, helping us break down the Toronto Blue Jays as they enter spring training. I'm going to have Cleveland Indians play-by-play announcer Jim Rosenhaus come on to our show at March 22nd to talk about the Cleveland Indians. They've had a big offseason as well. You look at them, they added Nick Swisher.
Probably the second most time.
I think they different with the Dodgers.
Who did they get besides Zach Greinke?
Well, they had a big offseason from like, I guess you could say
from the trade. Okay, yeah, because you have Crawford coming in. Yeah, you're right.
So, but yeah, you look at the Indians. I mean, you have Drew Stubbs, you had Michael Bourne, Nick Swisher, a whole bunch of those players.
Mark Reynolds.
You look at all the minor league contracts they handed out: Jason Giambi, Scott Kazmir, Dice K. It's going to be really interesting. I can't wait to talk to him about that. The reason why we can't have him on before then, all the Indians games happen to be at 3:00.
Yeah,
Eastern
all the
time.
spring training games. Yeah, they started today too. So
kind
of a conflict.
Every Friday at 3:00, he's going to be on. So I mean, I was going to try to have him call in during the game, but it wouldn't work out that way.
Yeah.
This will happens March 22nd. They're playing at 10:00 Eastern time in Arizona, so we'll look to have him on then. But as we mentioned, Toronto Blue Jays are a team who I really think can contend this year. But I mean, I'm kind of worried about their pitching staff. I mean, as I mentioned, Josh Johnson has struggled since coming off of Tommy John surgery. As I mentioned, he was 8-14 this past season in a pitcher's ballpark. He's going over to a hitter's ballpark. Burley, who had success with the Chicago White Sox because he had great fielders. He even mentioned Bob Elliott that he's had some 1-0 games, perfect games, no hitters. But he's going to a hitter-friendly ballpark now. He's facing teams like the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox, who pride themselves on power hitters. So I'm kind of curious to see what we're going to have there. I still think Los Angeles Angels have the best team currently in the AL, but I think Toronto's a close second.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to put them, I guess, the one when you have pretty much the best right-handed and best left-handed hitter in the game on the same team. But as he said, on the radio that, but the team on paper doesn't win championships because, I thought that, the Angels had a great team last year. And that was without us even counting Mike Trout in that conversation.
He gained like 30 or 40 pounds.
Yeah, he came in at like 240. He said he's not fat though, so hopefully he doesn't lose any speed because he's going to be a guy that's going to have a lot of pressure on him at the top of that lineup now based on his production last year. And I think a lot of teams have had a chance to get some tape on him, and you're going to see pitchers thrown at him differently this year. So they're a team, they don't make the playoffs this year. I think Mike Scioscia has to go because there's no reason that you shouldn't make the playoffs this year with that lineup. So I think they're in a pressure situation right now where they have to win. Texas is still going to be there. Seattle, I think, is, they made a little bit of a push last year, so they'll be up there as well. But I think Toronto, same thing, team on paper right now. I think it's going to be a transition year this year. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. I think maybe the next year, maybe a wild card, depending on, that they changed that rule to having 2 teams. That would make a big difference. So they did change it, didn't they? Yeah, playing game.
Yeah.
So they might make it to the playing game. That makes a big difference as well.
I think the Blue Jays can actually win the division, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really.
No, the reason why I'm saying this is you look at the Yankees pitching.
Yeah, I don't think the Yankees.
Sold on their pitching. I don't think Corona's going to have.
You got to always count them in, but they're definitely having. This is definitely a drop off year for them. I don't think Boston's going to make it this year unless John Farrell does a complete 360 on that pitching rotation.
I mean, you look at.
He still got Tampa Bay.
You look at Sabathia; he's already dealing with some injuries right now in spring training. You have Kuroda, who's getting older again. I believe he's 37.
Hopefully, Michael Pineda can come back. That's the one guy that's young, but he's out all last season.
Velocity's still down, but I believe he's still battling an injury. Pettit, who's now 42 or 43, I want to say.
Yep.
Hughes, who's been on and off, inconsistent. I know because I have my fantasy team, so I kind of kept an eye on that.
Yeah, he hasn't been good for
Nova,
a couple of years.
Inconsistent as well too. They also lost Russell Martin, their catcher. Currently, they're supposed to go with Austin Romine. You don't know what he's going to give you. Derek Jeter gets older. Kevin Youkilis didn't really produce batting average-wise.
Bring Hafner
this
in.
past season. Hafner struggles. I mean, there's so many question marks on the Yankees team. I mean, Ichiro Suzuki, he had a great spark from last season, but you don't know if you're going to get from him.
He's old.
He struggled in Seattle last season before he got traded to the Yankees. Curtis Granderson, he's produced 240 home run seasons the last 2 years, but can he do it again?
He's been on the trade market a lot recently as well. So
Brett Gardner really didn't see much time last season. He's going to be in the starting lineup now. There's so many question marks.
A-Rod's out for probably maybe the whole season. And if he even plays again for the Yankees, there's a lot of controversy going on out there.
Isn't he linked to that Miami list?
Yeah, he. It's obvious he took it. I mean, he's already admitted to it in the past of, doing steroids, and then he has a hip injury as well. So he's going to be out. They said for at least the first half of the season, at least, with that hip surgery. So that was the reason why he struggled in the playoffs, even though he's been a choker his whole career. Besides that 1 year they won the World Series, he's always been a choker. So it had an effect, but I mean, we're talking about a guy who's honestly, besides one season, has not showed up in the playoffs.
Yeah, I have to agree.
You lose Nick Swisher, which I think which wasn't a good move. Good for us, good move for the Indians though. But it's going to be interesting, definitely, no doubt about it.
This AL East is really an interesting division to me. So I want to break it down next week. I mean, you look at Boston; they've made a lot of moves themselves. They now have Steven Drew over at shortstop, Mike Napoli at first base, Johnny Gomes they get from the Oakland Athletics in left field, Shane Victorino now in right field. Pitching staff is pretty much the same, except they added Ryan Dempster. But they have a new manager, John Farrell,
who I love John Farrell.
Who's a former pitching coach.
Imagine if he would have stayed in Toronto with that team they have right now. I mean, they would be that him staying there would have made me more comfortable saying what you're saying, putting them as the number one, as the best team in the division, because he's a great manager. And I think he's going to show how good he is with the Red Sox.
But his specialty is pitching, and Ricky Romero struggled last season.
But I mean, if you give him Josh Johnson, Mark Burley, R.A. Dickey, now you're going to see some magic.
Yeah, but what problems have I just identified? I mean, you have a guy who's a fly ball pitcher in a hitter ballpark.
But if you have a pitching coach as a manager,
you have a guy coming off Tommy John
that.
surgery.
You can adjust to that.
And you have a 38-year-old knuckleballer who really has been consistent just for a year and a half.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of question marks, as I mentioned, with that staff. I think they can potentially win that division, but it's something we can debate on next week. So we have to talk about the Bills. We never really got a chance to talk about
George Wilson signed with the Titans today.
Yeah, George Wilson signed with the Titans today. Obviously, they cut Nick Barnett and Terrence McGee, and they signed Tavares Jackson. And apparently, he's going to be in a quarterback competition with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but his contract's not guaranteed. So one of my big questions for next week is, what round will the Bills draft a quarterback?
And then Combine as well. So
yeah,
that'll be a week will be through with Combine, so definitely.
So this is what you'll be looking forward to, the AL East conversation, obviously, that, and what round will the Bills draft a quarterback, and how are they going to replace those pieces on the defensive side of the ball? This is Sports Reporters Radio Show. I'm the host, AJ Speier. Aubrey Gibert alongside with me, signing out.